The story of Linh and the wisdom of time. In a serene village nestled beneath the towering peaks of a sacred mountain, there lived a young girl named Linh. She was a bright and talented student, admired by her teachers and peers for her intelligence and quick wit. Linh excelled in every subject at school, and many believed she had a brilliant future ahead of her. Her parents, devout Buddhists, instilled in her the teachings of the Buddha, emphasizing mindfulness, discipline, and the fleeting nature of time. Yet, despite their wisdom, Linh didn't fully understand the importance of time. Linh often spent her days in ways that brought her momentary happiness but left her feeling unfulfilled in the long run. She would waste hours scrolling through her phone, chatting with friends, and playing video games, when her parents urged her to focus more on her studies and make better use of her time. She would laugh it off. "I'm still young. I have plenty of time to learn later," Linh would say. She believed that the future would always be there, waiting for her to catch up, and she thought there was no harm in enjoying the present moment. Her parents often shared the Buddha's teachings with her, particularly those on the nature of impermanence, urging Linh to embrace the truth that life, like time, is fleeting. They explained that everything changes, and nothing lasts forever, not even time itself. But Linh, though she understood these concepts intellectually, failed to see how they applied to her own life. "I'll worry about it later," she thought, dismissing her parents' advice as unnecessary concern. Despite her natural intelligence, Linh continued to procrastinate. Whenever she had an important task, she would always think, "I'll do it tomorrow," only to find herself distracted by something else, something more immediate and fun. In her mind, the future was always a distant thing, something she could plan for at her own convenience. Her life became an endless cycle of postponing important things, telling herself that she would eventually get around to them. Then, the fateful day arrived, the day the results of her final exams were announced. Linh opened the envelope, her heart pounding with anticipation. But as she read the scores, her excitement turned to disbelief. Her grades were shockingly low, far below what anyone had expected, especially for someone with her natural intelligence. It was a crushing blow. Linh had failed. Her teachers, who had once praised her as one of the brightest students in the class, were now disappointed. Her friends, who had once admired her, began to distance themselves, sensing that something had changed. Lin's sense of pride was shattered, and she returned home feeling devastated. Her parents greeted her with silence, their faces etched with sadness. They didn't scold her, but their disappointment was clear. Linh could feel the weight of their expectations crushing down on her. "What have I done?" she asked herself. She had always been told she had the potential for greatness, but now that potential seemed wasted. That night, Linh sat in her room, tears rolling down her face as she wondered how it had all gone wrong. She had worked so hard, or so she thought, but why had she failed? Why had she squandered her time on trivial pursuits? In search of answers, Linh decided to visit her grandfather the next morning. Her grandfather was an elderly monk, wise and peaceful, living in a small temple by the edge of the village. He had always been a source of wisdom for her, teaching her about the impermanence of life and the importance of mindfulness. His temple, surrounded by lush trees and flowing streams, was a place where Linh often went when she felt lost or confused. When Linh arrived at the temple, her grandfather was sitting in meditation. As usual, she sat quietly beside him, waiting for him to finish his practice. After a while, her grandfather opened his eyes and smiled when he saw her. Linh didn't need to say a word. Her grandfather could always sense when something troubled her. "Grandfather," Linh said softly, "I don't understand what went wrong. I tried hard, but I failed my exams. I don't know what happened." Her grandfather listened to her with kindness and patience. When she finished speaking, he remained silent for a moment, deep in thought. Finally, he spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Linh, my dear, the problem is not that you are not intelligent. You are very gifted. The problem is that you have not yet understood the true value of time. Time is precious, more precious than anything else. Because once it's gone, you can never get it back." Linh looked at him, puzzled. "But I have time, don't I? I'm still young. I can always catch up later. Her grandfather smiled gently but shook his head. No, Lin. Time is like a river, flowing constantly. It never stops. And once it passes, it's gone. You may think you have all the time in the world, but the truth is, you don't. The Buddha spoke of the impermanence of all things, including time itself. You must learn to use it wisely, for you cannot stop the river from flowing. Lin was silent, absorbing her grandfather's words. But grandfather, she asked, how can I learn to use my time better? I feel like I've wasted so much already. Her grandfather nodded, his eyes full of understanding. Let me tell you a story, one that may help you understand. The story of King Saka and the value of time. Long ago, in a faraway kingdom, there was a mighty king named Saka. King Saka was a ruler of immense wealth, strength, and wisdom. His kingdom prospered under his reign, and his people loved him dearly. Yet, despite all his power, King Saka had a flaw: he did not value his time. Each day, King Saka would wake up late and spend his mornings indulging in luxurious banquets and frivolous conversations with his courtiers. He would delay important matters, telling himself, I will take care of it tomorrow. His days were filled with distractions, and the kingdom's affairs were left unattended. One day, a wise monk visited the palace. The monk observed the king's lifestyle and approached him with a gentle warning. Your Majesty, the monk said, you have everything, wealth, power, and people who adore you. But you are wasting your most valuable treasure, time. Time is the most precious thing in the world. If you do not use it wisely, you will one day regret it. King Saka laughed at the monk's words. I am a king, he said. I have plenty of time. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. Time is not something I need to worry about. The monk's expression grew serious. Time is like the river, he said. It flows constantly, and once it's gone, you cannot retrieve it. Do not squander it, or it will destroy even the mightiest of kings. But King Saka did not heed the monk's advice. He continued his life of indulgence, always postponing important tasks. Years passed, and as time slipped away, King Saka grew older, his health began to fail, and his kingdom began to weaken. His once vibrant nation faced challenges, and his enemies grew stronger. The people who once loved him began to lose faith in his ability to rule. One day, in the twilight of his reign, King Saka sought the monk again, hoping to find answers, but when he arrived at the monk's hermitage, he found that the monk had gone. The king was filled with regret. He realized that he had wasted his time on trivial pursuits, neglecting his responsibilities and his people. Now, with his health failing and his kingdom in decline, King Saka understood the true value of time. He wept, for he knew that no amount of wealth or power could bring back the time he had squandered. Lin sat in silence, deeply moved by the story. She realized that she had been just like King Saka, wasting time on things that brought her temporary pleasure but no lasting fulfillment. She had neglected the precious gift of time, and now she had to face the consequences. Grandfather, Lin said softly, I see now. I have wasted so much time. But can I change? Can I still use my time wisely and make up for what I've lost? Her grandfather smiled gently and nodded. Of course, Lin. The Buddha taught us that it is never too late to change. Every moment is a new beginning, and as long as you are alive, you can choose to use your time wisely. The key is mindfulness, being aware of each moment and making the most of it. Lin took her grandfather's words to heart. From that day on, she made a conscious effort to live differently. She woke up earlier, planned her day carefully, and prioritized her studies. She let go of distractions and used her time to work toward her goals. Slowly, but surely, Lin began to see the fruits of her labor. Her grades improved, her focus sharpened, and her life became more peaceful. Years later, Lin became a successful businesswoman and a respected member of her community. But more than her success, she found deep inner peace, knowing that she had learned to value time. She never forgot the lessons her grandfather had taught her and shared them with others, reminding them that time is a gift, one that should never be taken for granted. The final lesson: the Buddha's teachings remind us that time is fleeting. It flows constantly, and once it is gone, we cannot turn it back. Therefore, it is essential to live mindfully, to value every moment, and to use our time wisely. Life is impermanent, and time waits for no one. By living with intention and purpose, we can make the most of the precious time we have.